In this demonstration, we'll be learning how to apply color to a black and white image to basically colorize it and make it look convincing and realistic. I've currently got 3 files open already under these separate tabs, and you should have downloaded these files as well. 2 of them are for reference and 1 is the actual working file. This one is just basically a reference. I'm simply going to zoom in and I'll probably close this soon. But this is what we're going after, what you see on the label here, and we can apply some brown to the bottle. So that's kind of the look we're going after. Okay, this file over here called beer label is the flat art that was originally used for that mock-up beer bottle, and we're going to use this to sample the colors from. And then finally, this file that I have in the middle here is the one we will colorize. So I think to start the process, let's just go and capture those color chips, or create color chips based on these main colors. There's pretty well 4 of them. There's this yellow, the red, the green, and the blue. With respect to these colors, because there's a gradient in them, we'll eventually sample the darker tone of that, but we won't be saving those chips. So to sample the colors, I'm going to go to my eyedropper tool over here, and I'll sample each color. So I'll start with the yellow up at the top here. And then I need to add the swatch to save it. So I'm going to add swatch, create new swatch, which captures that latest selection. And I'm just going to call them beer yellow in this case. Beer yellow, and click OK. And it will appear here as well. Then I'll sample the green of the leaf, which is the same as the green at the bottom here. Add swatch. We'll call that one beer green. Okay, and there's 2 of them there. Now I'll sample the red. Click the add new swatch. Call that beer red. Okay, and then finally the blue. So go to the solid piece of blue underneath the logo here. Capture that, and we'll click the plus button once again, and we'll call that beer blue. Okay. So I've got the main colors, and I'll use this as a reference just so I know what's supposed to be yellow, what's supposed to be red, etc. Right? So I might be toggling back and forth. I actually know this image quite well, being the creator, but assuming this was just handed to you, you may need to toggle back and forth. So I will leave that file open for now. But let's go to the actual file we intend to work on, which is called bottles JPEG underscore bw.jpg. Before you even get started, we should save this as a fresh new file. So I'm going to go up here, go File, Save As. And I have a folder here for this beer stuff, so I think I'll save it in that same little project folder. But under Format, I'm going to choose Photoshop. And I will change the name. I want you to change the name to your last name and the assignment number. So currently this is assignment 3, but if that changes, just make the number according to the assignment number. So I've got last name 03.psd. I know where I'm saving it, and I set it to Photoshop format. Save. There we go. Now we actually have a new file that exists on the hard drive, and we can just save as we go. Now it starts with this background layer, as you can see here, and I'm actually going to shrink this a bit so I can see more of my layers, and I can scroll that up a bit as well and just drag that up here. Okay, so there's a couple of conceptual approaches that we can take to this. I'll show you the first one, I guess, which is a little more old school, where you're painting directly onto the pixels, but I think I'm going to jump into a less destructive method, if you will, by creating new layers and applying the color on the new layers using various blend modes, a feature called blend modes, which I'll introduce you through this exercise. But if I was going to do it directly on to the graphic, at the very least, to be prudent, I'm going to duplicate this layer so that I can always retain this original black and white version. So to do that, I can simply right click it and go duplicate layer. And it'll ask me to name it. I'll call it, I'll just go BW bottle. Okay. All right, so this one basically is always being saved as the original version. So with that layer selected, let me introduce you to the blend modes. And I think I'll start by working with the brush tool. The blend modes can be applied to various tools. And as a more powerful feature, they can actually be applied as well to a layer. So we'll leverage that feature in a minute. But for now, let's just make sure we have that layer selected. I'm going to go over to my brush tool. And I'm going to set my brush up to have a hard edge. I can always adjust the size with my keyboard shortcuts, but I'm going to click on the brush settings here. And it actually is already set the hardness to 100. If yours isn't, set it to 100. Size is not particularly relevant because I'm going to change it, as you will see shortly. But if you're done with that, you can just click the arrow again. And what you see here is the size of my brush. So for example, if I was just to paint, that's the size of my brush. I'm obviously going to undo that with a Control Z on the PC, Command Z on the Mac, and show you some blend modes. So the modes up here, when you're on tools that can apply color, you see a little box called Mode up here with a pull-down menu. You have a lot to choose from. I would invite you to go in and change each one of these and scribble your brush across the graphic just to see what they do. But for now, I am going to cut to the chase a little bit. For the most part, I want to do colorization. And we do have one mode called color, which will work in most situations. Not all, but in most situations. Okay, so I'm going to start with the one called color. And let's see, I guess I'll start with the red of the beer bottle. If we go over here, we can see where that red is. It runs behind the logo. And these elements are all yellow, and those leaves are green. So sort of the background area of this top section, if you will. So let me select that red chip. And with my brush tool, set the color. My hardness set to 100%. I will scribble once more before getting into this, but look what that does. That's the color mode. It literally just takes the tone and applies color. Therefore, where there's a highlight, where it's actually lighter in the pixels, it will retain that, and it will be darker over here, and it will retain that. It's not like a hard marker going over it. It's almost like I'm painting through maybe cellophane or something. So let me just Control Z on my Mac here, Command Z to undo on the PC, and get into this properly. I will remind you for the brush tool, look at the brush tool size there. The two buttons next to the P on your keyboard, the brackets, the left bracket makes it smaller. The right bracket makes it bigger. Okay, so the idea here is with the precision, I will need to zoom in and move around using my space bar. Zooming in, again, is Control plus on the PC. And I'm going to get right in here, about this big, and then my space bar to move around. Okay, so if someone was cut off, I can still work, and then through the operation, just use my space bar to move it down. Once I let go of the space bar, you see the little hand disappear, and you get your brush back as well. So I definitely will use a smaller brush. So let me just go over this and shrink that a bit. My color is already set. And I can just go around here and get these little areas. Now you're going to constantly be shrinking to get the little areas and expanding to get the bigger areas. But let me show you a little strategy here with our brush tools where I can kind of make straight lines, short straight lines. If I click once and then come over here with my shift key down and click again, it connects the 2 points, right? So I've got my shift key down here and I'm just going across and doing short strokes that are truly square, or straight rather, but when I do the short lines it does conform to the curve, okay? Also, I'm being forgiven here because I can paint over the white, and since it's a color thing, you see how that I'm going manually here, it doesn't really affect the white anyway. I'm just manually dragging my cursor around right now. Okay, so the idea here is to go around, and I do suggest using that shift click because there's a lot of straight edges around here. But go around there. Okay, I'm not going to do this whole thing. I'm just going to do a little portion of it here, but if I click here and shift click here, click over here, that's the idea of filling in the red. So I'll quickly demonstrate with the green and the yellow and then the blue. And then I'm going to introduce you a probably better way to do this. or at least a less destructive way. So let's kick over to the green. And the green's the same thing. Let me make the brush smaller. And again, because I have the white around there, it's a little forgiving, but it might appear white in areas, but it's probably truly gray pixels, so do be careful. Okay. Now over here, even though that it's, looks like white, it's actually a gray. So I'm going to make my brush relatively small here and just go in there and paint that. A stylus probably would be ideal for this. Let me undo that because I messed up on one of the edges. Oh, another tip here. It's better to do short little strokes and clicks, because if you do make a mistake like I just did, I had to undo the whole thing, but if you do short little strokes, you only undo that one little stroke. Okay, so there's some green. Let me show you how we're going to address the yellow though. Okay, let me call up the yellow. Because yellow's a bit different, right? It looks white in the black and white. So if I make my cursor a bit bigger here, I'm still on the color blend mode. I've got that yellow as my foreground chip. Let me go over this white bar here. You see how it's not really catching? It's actually catching the dark pixels on the outside, which is even less ideal. So let me undo that. As an inexperienced user, you probably have to go through here and try some of the different ones, but I'm going to cut to the chase again on this. Think of the logic. I'm painting on a white surface with a light color, but the color is still darker than the white. So I'm just going to go to darken. And having tried this before, I know that this will work beautifully here. So I'm going to click once and then come over here and do a shift click. And I'm kind of shift clicking my way around that slightly curved line. Okay, and again, if you need to adjust your brush tools while you're working, then do so. But this is the darken mode. See up here it says darken, and it's the perfect solution for getting this yellow over the top of the white. Okay, and that would apply down here as well. Now these look white, but they're actually gray, so darken may very well work in there, and it seems to. So again, I'm just short little strokes, so that if I have to undo, I don't undo all the good stuff that came just before this. Okay. And yeah, definitely a stylus would lend itself to this. I'm comfortable with a mouse, but a stylus would certainly be better. Okay. And let me go to my reference quickly here. Yeah, so that bottom, these words, the original Botographs band, those would be yellow as well. So now again, because I'm using dark, and see that area is so dark around there, I can kind of get away with this, right? I don't have to be overly fussy and careful when I'm going in to do the line work. Just because of the darken feature, I can take advantage of that a little bit because it's on a darker background. I'm still being careful though, mind you, when I'm going around. And it may, in certain situations, may need to be zoomed in on even further, but I'm fine here. I'm actually going to make my brush just a touch bigger and come over here. Okay. Now I would have to go around that with the green. So if I go back to the green and change that back to color to do this stuff around. And here I would have to be much more careful. Maybe I would have been better doing the green first, actually. But a little back and forth, right? There we go. And the final color I'm going to address is this logo, which is actually no black in it, right? It's what you see as black is blue, and what you see as white is white. So I need to turn all of these black pixels to blue, yet keep the white pixels white. So let's call up the blue color to start with. I'm going to make my brush big just to demonstrate here. And if I go in with color, it's, my black stays black and my white stay white. The white part's okay, but the black part is not acceptable. There is a feature, again, I'm going to cut to the chase here, called screen. However, see, that does do what I want it to do. However, if I paint once and then I paint over it again, it accumulates, and that's not desirable either. So let me undo those last couple of steps here and show you how you would be best to deal with this. We should isolate it. So I'm going to make a selection to isolate it using the polygon lasso tool. Again, I'm going to do a kind of a fast click around here just to cut to the chase. But let's say, I'm getting a better line. It's not bad what I'm doing, but it is a little too rushed. But getting a good line here, and I'll just kind of end it off over here and slice it down. I've got a selection now, and I can apply the blend mode. So this is a good opportunity to show you another place to apply the blend mode when painting directly onto pixels. And that would be under Edit Fill. And I do want to use the foreground color, but look at blending mode. It's actually already set to screen, but if it wasn't, make sure you set it to screen. Click OK. There we go. So that's like a single pass with a brush. I suppose I could have made a giant brush too and swooshed across it. That would have worked as well. Okay. So I'm just going to deselect, Control D or Command D on the Mac. And that's, that's the basics of colorizing this particular image. You're not required to do the bottle in the back. But having demonstrated all this, let me go to part 2 now of this exercise. Okay, so I'm just going to hide this one layer. Let me just hit the view button. I'm going to actually duplicate that background original layer one more time. More or less because I tend to be overcautious, but I'm going to highlight it, right click, duplicate layer. Okay, I'll call this BW. I'll call it BW bottle 2, I guess, since I already have one. Okay, and I will drag it to the top of the pile. And this is, honestly, I could delete that, I suppose, but I'm going to just leave it there for the sake of our exercise for today. But I'm starting over here. So the method that we're going to use on this technique is additive, I guess, if you will. We're going to leverage the layers. And if you look in here, layers also have blend modes. So I'm going to work with the blend modes in the layers versus in the brush. Okay, so we can apply them directly to pixels when we apply the blend mode in the brush. In this case, we're going to paint solid colors on layers above the graphic and change the blend modes, and they will respond to the layer below exactly the same way as if you were painting onto those pixels. So I'll start by creating a new layer above there. I'll call this one red. Okay, and I will still use my brush tool, of course, and I'm going to select red, but it's my layer that I want to change the blend mode, so I'm going to set that to color. Okay, I will zoom up, Control plus, and start to paint this red section in. Now my brush is way too big, so let's just make an adjustment there. And what I'm in fact painting on is on this layer. So I do need to go back, and this is actually quite important. Once I'm on the brush, set that one back to normal. So set brush back to normal, and we will apply the blend modes through the layers, and I've already set that one to color. So here we go. And if I just click, you'll see it works fine. Now with the color mode, I can, go over the same spot over and over, and it's not cumulative. So I'm just going to make my brush a proper size here and kind of get this as accurate as possible. Again, I'm going to shift click my way around. So it's like a coloring book where I'm doing the edges, and I'll do the big fill areas with a bigger brush, if you will. So I can bring that down to here, down to here. To make these, fill in between the line features. Now I missed a little spot there, so I'll just freehand scrub over that and come over here. I could make my brush a little bigger at this point and just start to click my way across. And okay, so I'll make the brush smaller as I go around the logo. And don't worry if you go over the edges. We can always use the eraser tool to pull it back, okay? And that's what I intend to do here, to repair any slightly over the line action that I may create. Okay, and again, I'm using my shift key a lot here to make those little short straight lines. Okay, now I'm going to save as I go here, Command S. And I'm going to click Don't Show Again for this box. There we go. All right. So for in between these lines, I probably need to shrink my brush just a little bit. All right. All right. And again, I'm using my shift click here. Come over here, shift click. Make sure you just go to the edge of the label, right? I can say I went over the line a little bit on the little piece above there. So let's address that right now. See, I kind of went over the line there. We have an eraser tool right here. So let me click on the eraser tool. And I just want to make sure that the sharpness, hardness is set to 100, and it is. There we go. Same deal with the brush size. I can shrink it with the bracket keys on the keyboard. So I'm going to click here. And then shift click here. And there, clean that up, easy peasy. Save. Alright, so I'm going to do the red in this middle section now. So we will change the brush according to our needs. Oh, let me go back here. Oh, I'm actually on the eraser tool. Let me go back to the brush tool. There we go. And carry on from there. I went over the line on that first click, but I'm not going to sweat it. I can come back with my eraser later and clean that up. So there's a sort of I guess an editing process typically. And that holds true honestly for a lot of things you create. You'll go in and do as best you can the first pass, but a second pass to make it perfect. Or at least better. I don't know if there's anything such thing as perfect. So I'm just going by hand here around this shape, and you can see again that I kind of slipped there at the bottom. And I probably should be doing this in slightly shorter spurts. But let me just go grab my eraser, make the brush very small, and just kind of fix what I broke there. I might as well deal with this over here as well. There we go. Back to the brush and carry on. The hardest part is probably around this area too. So it is a little labor intensive, especially when you're new at it. But I recall friends who used to work at a film company when I was going to art school that would do this manually on each frame of film for old black and white movies to colorize them, believe it or not. Anyhow, I digress here. Let me just continue on. So again, I'm trying to sort of get the edges like a coloring book. Now down here where the flagpole is, it's a tight little spot, so I'm going to shrink my brush and carefully draw around there like that. Okay. I can make the brush a bit bigger again for coming around here. Okay. So we'll get the brush even bigger at this point. And try not to mess up. It's good and prudent to save often, like I'm going to save again right now. And no, it's labor intensive, and it's I don't know, it might be boring watching me actually do the whole thing here. So I think I'll sort of cut to the chase on this as well and just show you sections. But again, to get in and around this niggly area, I would need to make my brush small and probably be prudent to zoom up and then move it around to center it. But I would just come in here. Again, I'm clicking so that I don't make it all one long line. Again, in case I mess up, I don't have to undo everything. So let me make it really small so I can get in between the K and the I. And the I in the end. So I'm just going to do this little part. I'll leave this undone so that I don't bore you with more video of me working. But that's the red layer. Like again, now watch when I turn off the visibility. See, it's kind of temporary, right? I can even mess around just for fun and change the blend modes. And you get an instant preview actually when you're using the layer method. And you can see what all the different blend modes actually will do. Okay, which is actually a really nice way when you're experimenting, but I do want to settle back on the color mode. Okay, Command minus to reduce my view, save my file, and I'll do a little bit of the green here, but it's exactly the same as the red. So I will make a new layer for each color. Okay, so let's make one new layer. I'll call that one green. Green. Okay, on my brush tool, of course, switch the colors from my color chips. and proceed to start to paint some of the green stuff. We will make my brush a bit bigger here. Again, I'm doing short little clicks. And you know, I didn't change my blend mode yet. I was thinking this looks a little opaque. Now I can do that after the fact, and that's what I'm going to do right now. And back to color for this one as well. And you'll see it changed, and it is a little more forgiving now that it's in that mode. Okay, the parts that went overlapped in the white, they don't really show up in color mode. Okay, so down here as well, I guess I would be coloring. I don't know if you can hear my dogs barking in the back, but there must be a coyote or something outside. Okay, so I'm going in again. I'm shift clicking to create these short straight lines, and then I can do a little bit of freehand with the mouse or the stylus. Okay, so that's the green for the most part. The yellow, let's deal with the yellow. So let me make another new layer for the yellow. Name it. Okay, hit my return key to accept that name. Switch the color, of course. Go to my brush tool. Oh, I'm on my brush tool. And yellow, if you recall, since it's such a light color, but I'm painting over an even lighter color, which is more or less white, I will use the blend mode darken. So I'm going to switch that over right now to darken. And this is having, you know, tried it out, knowing that this will work, of course. Otherwise, you can try it out with, it could have been in color, and you could have switched to darken later to discover it. So my cursor, I just make it just a little bigger, my brush. Okay, and I'm set on darken right now, so if I click here, again, it's forgiving. The red and the bottle color, which is dark grays, will not really respond to this darken mode. Just the light areas, which happens to be this white stripe. Okay. Now, I think the King's of Beer was yellow as well. And again, because it's on the darken mode, I can actually make my brush even bigger, and it's not hardly going to affect anything else. Look at this. Like that. Even over here, in fact. You do see it a little bit, though. Let me undo that one step. Don't want to make it too sloppy looking. And then down here as well, the original Motograss band was yellow, so I will shrink my brush. Now, some of this over here might work better as color, but I'm going to keep it as darken for now because the environment behind it is even darker. And it's definitely working well here. Okay, so I'm just kind of scrubbing across these letters, trying to be accurate, but again, due to the mode, it's being a little forgiving, which makes my job a little easier. Okay, so I'm just going to stop here on the word Motograss. And I think this bottom bar was yellow, so I'll do that because that's pretty easy to kind of complete here. So short little straight lines. I'm holding my shift key down. Short little straight lines. Okay, coming around the corner. And there we go. Okay, I'll use my eraser just to fix that little bit of spillage here. There we go. Save, right? Okay, let me reduce the view here. Now, the beer bottle, the label, the logo, the logo. We want the black parts to be blue. We want the white parts to remain white. It's going to basically be the same method we use by using a selection tool to isolate it, and we'll use the fill command. Except on the fill command, we will use the normal blend mode on the fill, and we'll use the screen mode. It was the screen mode that worked for that one on the layer. So let me start by creating the new layer for that. I'll call it blue. Okay, and now I will go over to my polygon lasso tool. I will zoom up, and I will attempt to make this fairly accurate here. Again, you can see I'm doing short little bits, right? Not one big long line. Well, the nature of the shape dictates that I must do that. Okay, so I'm just going to come around here, the top. And I'm almost around here. I made one little goofy spot there, but I can, I can come and fix that later. that's the beauty of this. It's very editable no matter what stage of the process you're in when you're doing something in a non-destructive fashion like this. There we go. Okay, there's my shape. So let me just select the blue for the color. Okay, so let's go up to the Edit pull-down menu and let's choose Fill. Now we want to make sure that our content is set to foreground color, our blending mode is set to normal, 100%, and make sure that this Preserve Transparency box is unchecked. The reason for that is we're painting on a brand new, completely transparent layer, and this means, if it's checked, it means it won't drop any ink where there's transparency. The whole layer is transparent, so nothing's going to happen if I had that checked. So make sure that is unchecked, and then click OK. So right now I've got this big swatch. I just have to go over to my blending mode in my layer, for my layer called blue, and change that to screen. We had determined that screen was the right one, but the nice thing here again is that you can go through and have a look at every single blend mode and see what it does. Okay, so I will settle on screen, as that is the one that turns all my black pixels into blue and retains the white pixels. There we go. Definitely want to save that. And I'm just going to do a little bit of brown for the beer bottle. So I'll create another new layer for that really fast. And I'll just call this beer brown. And I'm just going to create a color. I can deselect now, Control D or Command D on the Mac, and just zoom out. Now the nice thing with the beer bottle is it's mostly surrounded by white, so I will use the color blend mode on the bottle there. So I might as well switch that over right now to color. And you can't see it because I went below the screen, but I had chosen color in my blend modes, as you see it right there. Okay. Let me go and click on my color swatch, and let's make a nice brown here. There we go. I'm going to make my brush very large as well. Again, the brush should be set to normal mode because my layers are set to color. And look at this, because the background is pure white, I can just kind of scribble across here. When I get towards these other areas though, I will need to be precise. So I'm holding my shift key down, making sure my edge goes right to that yellow, and then the same for the bottom here. Now the bottom, there is a shadow which would capture the color. So I am going to make my brush smaller and be a little more careful around this bottom corner here. I can still shift click little short strokes though, like you see here. And then up here again I can kind of be a little more relaxed. I don't want to go over on that yellow line, however. Okay, almost there. And a thin line down the right side. So I'm going to make that brush quite small. Maybe one step bigger. Click there once and then shift click to connect those dots. And there we go. Okay, so I didn't finish it all. I don't want to bore you with you watching me just fill in more ink, but that is the concept on how we can create non-destructive color changes to a black and white image. Again, if I turn these layers off and I can scroll here, you can see there's our black and white, and I can go and select any layer on its own, of course, as well. So I'll turn them all back on here. And that's the method using the blend mode in the layer versus in the paint tool. Okay, so that's our colorization exercise for today. Once you've completed the whole foreground beer bottle, you don't need to do the background, but if you'd like to, by all means, have fun with it. Hand that in on canvas. And again, that is our colorization exercise for today.